Okie doke. So this one is going to be about sins of the mother. So last video was about sins of the father. And for men, whoever plays the parental role of the mother shapes your sexual identity. This is based on Freud and Wilhelm's work and Jung's work. So what we've got is in the leadership program, we did a list of all the things that we are angry at our mothers for, and I think it's really important that I share that because it really does shed some light onto what kind of dynamics that play out when we even hear the word mother, and that can play out in heterosexual relationships with your female partner. So here we go, here's some things. Got silent treatment, conditional love, unaccepting, guilt, domestic violence, disrespect, disassociation, emotional incest, control, selfishness, abandonment, neglect, Oedipal triangle, projections, reverse parenting, no boundaries, manipulation, criticism, sexual shame, short fuse, withholding love, depression, anxiety, invasive punishment/abuse, judgments, reactiveness, I can't remember if I said disassociation, idolizing, collusion, favoritism, family secrets. Now, for me, I think there was a lot of sexual shame and a lot of family secrets, and the triangle between Dad, Mum and myself was that Mum would share secrets with me about Dad, or she would emotionally offload onto me about Dad or whatever else was going on in her life, and that's emotional incest. And what that does for men in relationships is you feel a sense of overwhelm whenever a woman is opening up to you. So, like for me, especially if it was related to you, say it was something that you've done, and they were opening up to you about what you've done. It can be quite overwhelming, and so for me, in my relationships, I've always thought that the only way I can connect to someone is if they emotionally load on me. So I will tend to attract women that are very emotionally needy and need to always talk about their feelings, like non-stop, like text, phone, all the time. That always needs, and that's exactly the relationship that I had with my mother. And if you don't deal with it, you just keep repeating the same patterns. So you end up with this pattern of that all women are needy, or that all women are emotionally overwhelming and flooding. But it's actually you, the inner you, attracts that because that's what feels safe to you. That's what you're used to. So other things like selfishness and conditional love. My achiever wound, I was heartbroken by my mum, and I had a lot of conditional love growing up. Like it was the only way I could receive love was if I was either being an emotional sand pit or an emotional punching bag, or or doing something to please my mum, like suppressing my behaviour to make my mum happy. And then whenever I wanted something, I wasn't allowed to have it. So that aspect is played out in a lot of my relationships as well. And sexual shame. So sexual shame's a big one. So as you're growing up, you can feel sexually attracted to your parent, and depending on how they deal with that can shape your sexual identity. Now, as I was going through puberty, I don't think either of my parents actually spoke to me about it, or sex and body image was not talked about. I grew up in a very religious household, and I think that's a pattern in a lot of in a lot of families where religion is a theme, especially very strict religion, and sex isn't spoken about in a loving and caring way. It's like a mechanical act that you go to hell for if you do it outside of marriage. And then when you're in marriage, it's like, well, it was never spoken about. Like, my parents were either too ashamed to talk about it, and I know with some of the reasons, recently I've found out some of the reasons why, but a lot of it is that they're very prudish and sexually repressed as well. So I've taken on some of those traits of my dad and my mum too. So my mum is very prudish, and there was an icky sexual energy from my mum. There's not a loving, boundary-based bond with my mother. I feel like I've taken layers and layers and layers off doing this emotional work, but there's still more to go. And I don't want to attract women that are like that. I want to attract women that for the most part, have done a lot of emotional work and dealt with their shame at a deeper level, not just talking it over in therapy, like at a deep emotional level where you release that trauma, you release those issues in you, you feel the rage, you do the lower self-work. But with my mum, the sexual shame is, there's always this aspect of, it's just icky. It just feels icky. And my masculinity belonged with my mother. So my sexuality belonged with my mum. And when I heard that, I was like, what the fuck? I was completely repulsed about myself. I was really angry at my mum. I was really angry at my dad. I was really angry at really angry at like the spiritual realm as well. Like whatever's going on is like, it's bullshit. You know, I've spent a lot of my life in a sexually repressed place, and I'm missing out. I've been missing out on really good sex, and part of the achiever wound is about that, where I would be cut off from my sexual energy, and I would just have sex with women out of an act. There was no heartfelt connection there, and I feel like that time with my mum is that there was no heartfelt connection with my mum. It was purely I needed to do whatever I needed to do to survive. And those defenses have accrued over the years and cut me off from my creative sexual energy, and it's just put me all in my head. So during sex, I'll go straight into my head. I'll be all about technique and how I'm supposed to act. I'll be playing through all these lists in my head about how I'm supposed to be having sex, and completely lose presence. And I have had partners get really angry at me about that, which didn't help the situation. I understand why they were angry, but it's built into me. It's part of my wounding. It doesn't help. So, and it wasn't their responsibility to fix, but now I'm fixing it now. So it's there's a lot of emotional work to do for men, and a lot of it stems from mum, a lot of it stems from dad. But the sexual side, and if you want to have a heterosexual, deep, loving, fulfilling, heartfelt relationship with a woman, you need to do the emotional work on your mum. And there's lower self-work that I don't think a lot of therapists would like to go to, but the therapy that I'm doing at the moment is just perfect. And I can feel the sexual energy coming back into me. I can feel the creativity coming back into me. But doing the emotional work, the sins of the mother, is really, really, really important. One of these other things on the list was objectification. So mothers objectify their sons when they don't get the emotional needs met from the husband. And this is classic because at the moment we are bombarding men with not objectifying women. That's the rhetoric at the moment. But if you look deeper at it, they were objectified as a child, and that's the only way they know how to relate to women for the most part. And if that wound is not healed or looked at, they will continue to objectify women and not know that they're doing it. It's the normal behavior for them. And I think the ego controls, and like trying to look perfect in civilization, is what we're doing at the moment. Like, we're telling men not to do it, not to do it, not to do it, and it's not healthy for either sex to do this. But if you're tired, if you're unwell, if you've been drinking, if you're not present, you will default back to that behaviour that you learnt between 0 and 7, and there is nothing that you can do about it unless you do lower self-work. And that's what I'm about. Integrate the shadow and do your lower self-work for your mum, because if you don't, more generations of men are going to keep on objectifying women and holding a grudge against women, and hating women, and you're going to pass it on to your kids. So you're going to be a role model for your son, and you're going to transfer that icky energy onto your daughter. And I think it's really important for men as fathers, and men that want to be leaders, and men that just want to be better men, to look at this stuff and get fixed. So that's emotional work for men, sins of the mother. Thanks for listening.